Have you ever repeated a conversation in your head so many times that you don't know if you're being self aware or just anxious?
Hey, I'm Tiffany, and this is Between Sessions. I'm not your therapist, just a real person talking about the stuff you're probably already spiraling about at 2 a.m. Growth, relationships, anxiety, boundaries, and becoming more self aware without pretending you've got it all figured out. If you're healing and still a little messy, welcome. You're in the right place.
Hey y'all, welcome to Between Sessions. I'm Tiffany and I'm not your therapist, as I always say. Today we're going to talk about the difference between being self aware and anxious because it's really important to know that there's a very fine line with um, with doing the work and healing and growing. That therapy language being thrown around everywhere nowadays, it's so popular. And I think that we have to stop and take a second and realize, like, are we being self-aware or are we just being really anxious? Because there's a big difference but a fine line between the two, right? I think that everybody, like, journaling and reflecting and learning the patterns, needing to fix the patterns is important. Um, but are we doing it right? Are we doing the work right? Are we coming out the right way, I guess, is the best way to say it. Anyway, self aware is noticing patterns, reflecting that behavior, learning from, past experience. Anxiety is repeating conversations over and over again, thinking that you always do something wrong, thinking that someone's mad at you when you're probably just assuming, and then trying to predict how other people feel about you when it's really none of your business. That's what anxiety looks like. That's not being self-aware. At some point, self-aware, we have to realize that self-aware people ask questions. Anxious people, it becomes to an interrogation. You interrogate yourself, and that's not healthy. You guys know I took notes because I'm a rambler and I will get to everything else except for what I want to talk about. So, spiraling, it's everybody's favorite word nowadays, right? I use it all the time. Anytime that I am like overthinking and overanalyzing, I say that I'm spiraling. Absolutely. Spiraling about work, spiraling about relationships, dating, friendships, school, whatever, all of the above. We're doing that. We're repeating the conversations over and over again. That's anxiety. That's being anxious. Assuming that someone is upset, we tend to fall back on that. Anxious people. I listen. Before we go further, I'm going to self disclose I have anxiety. I am very anxious sometimes. I am not my disorder, right? However, I'm very aware of that. I'm a very self aware person that will spiral so much that I become anxious. So I am happy to say that I am self aware of those patterns, and have a lot of coping mechanisms to stop that anxiousness from taking over. And I'm hoping that I will share some of those with you all because they're so important. And, we don't want to interrogate ourselves forever, right? Being anxious is like analyzing every text, feeling like responsible for everybody around you's emotions, right? I think at some point it stops being reflection and it starts being like emotional surveillance. We are constantly worried about not only our behavior, which is important. Being accountable for your behavior is absolutely healthy. Feeling like you have to be responsible for everybody else and how they're feeling, that's exhausting. That's anxiety kicking in. That's not the healthy part. So, realizing those things in the moment are so important. Stopping and asking yourself the questions that need to be asked, I think it's so important. Um, and I think why this happens is also important. People pleasers are like this. We constantly want to, control how others perceive us. And we do that by, having that performative behavior where we want to constantly please and appease people to make sure that they are looking at us the right way, right? We're never wrong in somebody else's eyes. People pleasing, literally, y'all. I had to stop doing this. We should all stop doing this. I was listening to a podcast with Mel Robbins. She's my favorite. You guys, one of my favorites. I will talk about her a lot. And there's a few things that stuck out because I used to be a big people pleaser, and I had to like literally undo those habits in those core. I feel like it was like in my core map, right? My inner works to be a people pleaser for my whole life. And when I was doing like research on it, I read that it can have an impact on your immune system. Like people pleasers are more sick and they literally can die because their immune systems are so low versus people who are not people pleasers. Crazy, mind-blowing. Anyway, back to Mel Robbins. I was listening to a podcast that she was on, and she was really saying like, if we look at it in the perspective of people pleasing is actually manipulation and control, then it makes us want to stop. And when she broke it down and explained that like us like pleasing someone 24/7 is not normal behavior, like, right, there should be moments where you are not always like seen in the best of light, and that's not in necessarily negative ways. It could be a complete reflection of the other person, right? But when we're trying to please people, we're trying to control how they see us. Controlling is a form of manipulation when we are doing things that are sometimes out of our way for someone else or to please someone else. It's a form of manipulation. That's not who we really are, right? That was like so mind-blowing. Mel Robbins, love her to pieces, because that really, I mean, years ago did I realize that I was a people pleaser and that I needed to stop, and I did the research on like why I was that way and how to fix that. But I still catch myself going back into that. And so when I heard that on the podcast, I was like, ooh, I can't be me. Could it be me? Don't want to be that, right? And so sometimes we have to see things that real and that deep to realize that like, hey, this is not okay. We have to stop doing it. So being accountable for our own behavior is completely healthy, right? That's cool. It's when we feel responsible for everybody else's. That's when things become exhausting. I love that little piece I pulled out. So things that I had to kind of stop. Again, I still work on these things all day, every day, because I become very anxious in some situations, and it just happens. I'm not perfect either. So I have to like stop and ask myself, these are a few questions that I came to mind when I start to get anxious and start to spiral and start to repeat the same thing over and over, the same conversation, the same text message, whatever. Am I reflecting once, or am I replaying 100 times? So it's normal to like reflect on a conversation and maybe see how you could have done things better, how you would do it differently in the past, things like that. Not trying to find where you were wrong necessarily, but finding ways to improve. Everybody deserves to improve on communication, right? Reflecting once, not repeating 100 times. Is there evidence that something is wrong? So whether it was a text message, a conversation, like if everything around is supporting that everything was good, mood was fine before that text message came through or before that sentence was said or conversation was had, then there's likely nothing wrong. People can say things, text things, whatever, and just literally just be it. There's no tone behind it. There's no anything. I think with that one, I find it when it becomes like a question or a questionable statement, right? That I like really have to ask that, like, okay, is there like evidence that something is wrong in this dynamic? Or this is so big. Did someone say they were upset, or am I guessing? So which we, humans are sometimes not expressive with their emotions, and they can be upset and not actually express it, but that's not your problem. First and foremost, we could go on another entire rant about that. But unless somebody says that they are directly upset, like if they do not say to you, I am upset, or I am mad, or I am sad, or that hurt, then we can't just jump to those conclusions and guess that right away. Right? This is my opinion. But, and yeah, you guys can take it or leave it. But these are things that I try to ask when I'm in these situations. Is this helping me grow or feel worse? This is huge. The shower was always like my main place. I see the shower so differently now. We'll go into that in a second. But like, that was like the main place where my mind slowed down enough, and I would constantly replay conversations in my head over and over and over again, like crazy. And I was like over analyzing myself, and it was like self surveillance, like I said earlier. Like I was literally just analyzing myself. It was always in the shower, sometimes when I was driving, but I like to listen to music when I'm driving. Now I have turned the shower into like a peaceful moment. So when I am feeling anxious, I will actually just go get in the shower, and what I will actually envision is that the water dripping down and washing is like washing the day away, or like washing that anxiety away. And when I think about it that way, instead of how I did in the past, it really helps me like feel better, right? Feel more comfortable. And it's probably just a mind thing. When we change the way that we think about things, it feels better. Right? I mean, for example, Valentine's Day used to be really shit for me. It was like mine and my ex's anniversary, and after we split, I hated that day. Well, I ended up starting my cleaning business on Valentine's Day to like recreate that day in a happy sense. So when we do things in certain areas, you should try to replace it with something positive or a different view. So for me, I was repeating conversations over and over and over again, literally stressing myself out in the shower. So now I see it as like washing away those worries, washing away that anxiety. Love it. Kind of got off there anyway. Another thing that I just absolutely love to kind of know the difference in that self-awareness or that anxiety is that self-awareness creates clarity, where anxiety creates confusion. And I think that that's a big one for me, is that when I'm anxious about something, I'm confused. There's not much that I know in that moment. Even just today, something came up and I was just like spiraling, and I was so mad, and I just had to like sit back, and I was like, okay, where are we at? Like, are we being self-aware of this situation, or are we being anxious? And I was being 100% anxious because I was so confused. There was no clarity, there was no understanding. So I had to step back from that. I think that these things are so important, and when we have all this, I don't even know, the doing the work, the therapy language being thrown around, and, people like healing from certain things and thinking that like they're completely just above everybody emotionally, and like they're so self-aware. It's important to know that there's a difference between being self-aware and anxious. And I'm not on here to preach, and I never will preach, but I think that anxiety is so overlooked in a lot of ways. I started really, and I have gone in and out of anxiety like my whole life. I would say my whole adult life, probably as a kid too. We didn't know what it was back then. Okay, y'all, I'm pretty old. But anyway, like we didn't probably know what that was back then. And so when I actually like as an adult, became anxious and realized, oh shit, like sometimes I'm anxious and this is what it is. I had to like learn how to cope with those things. I'm not going to say I love medication, but I totally support medication. And I believe that medication is only a part-time thing, right? It shouldn't be a forever thing. It should be, we're going to take this medicine to manage this and then work through that, right? So as I was taking the medication, I was trying to work through like what I can do, like right there in the moment. A lot of people use it with panic attacks, but I like to use it like when I'm really anxious, is the 3-3-3 method. And I know it's like sometimes it's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and they do it differently. I do the 3, 3, 3 method. 3 things I can see, 3 things I can hear, 3 things I can move. And I'll actually practice those things. So I will name 3 things I can see. Like right now, I can see a pillow, I can see a computer screen, I can see the light. 3 things I can hear. I can hear the fan going, I heard the ice maker just now, and I can hear my own voice. And then 3 things that I can like physically move, I'll move them, right? Myself, the blanket, whatever the case is. So that was like a big one for me. Again, they often use them in panic attacks, but anxiety, when you're like right there in the moment, putting a piece of ice in your face, or even putting a piece of ice in your face, in your mouth, bless it, honey, y'all. Sometimes I'm like, I really should edit these stupid things out, but then I'm like, you know what? Maybe someone will catch it and I won't even catch it. Like, just let them have it, whatever. Anyway, putting a piece of ice in your mouth, because it like triggers your brain, like, hey, this is cold, not about whatever you're thinking about. Or putting your face in like an ice bath. I will put, ice from the freezer in a bowl and fill it with water, and I'll put my face in that, because that triggers your brain into that survival mode. Like, oh shit, we might die. This is really cold. We need to slow our heart rate down, which drops our blood pressure. So our brain is so focused on like survival in that moment that it can't think of whatever was making it anxious before. That kind of is a reset as well. Or eating something sour, that can cause the same thing to happen with your brain. Like, oh shit, this is sour. Those are just small things, and I think that once you become self-aware that you're being anxious, you can stop in those moments and do those things. But until we actually know what anxiety or being anxious looks like, we will cover them up with being self-aware. Oh, like and it's I think it's funny, because if you would have asked me like 2 years ago if I was self-aware or anxious, I would have said self-aware 100%. If you were to ask me today if I was self-aware or anxious 2 years ago, I would say I was anxious. I was 100% anxious. I was a people pleaser. I thought that I was always doing something wrong. Like, I was never right, even though I like held myself vocally and like physically, like on the outside, people probably were like, oh, Tiffany's like really self-aware. But really on the inside, I was like spiraling. Something wasn't right. Something wasn't healthy. I didn't understand. And I'm not perfect now. Like I said, I still spiral. I had a situation recently with someone, and I didn't understand it. And for me, I've really, really worked on things that, if the likelihood of me comprehending something because I'm not capable of it is very low. So like, if someone does something to me, or says something to me, and it's not an action that I would do, I'm never going to be able to understand, right? I read a really long time ago, someone said that like, if you were to try to analyze a serial killer and understand the mind of that serial killer, you're never truly going to understand it, because if you could understand it and put yourself in their shoes, you're capable of what they did. So we can never truly understand a serial killer unless serial killing is something we're capable of, right? So that situation that I was in recently, I'm not a serial killer. It wasn't. That went super left. Y'all will realize that sometimes I go like super left and then have to come back. Anyway, this situation that I was in recently really was really fucked up, and I honestly I'm not even really sure everything that happened, but I was just treated really fucking poorly by a really good friend that I thought was a really good friend, right? And I spiraled about it so much, and I was like, I do not understand. I don't understand how they got from this to this. Like, we were so close, such good friends, and now I'm like this bad person in their eyes, but they did things that were so fucked up, and I don't understand. And I had to really say, like, Tiffany, you cannot comprehend what you're not capable of. You are not capable of being that type of person or hurting people the way that they hurt you, so you're never going to understand it. And I say that very confidently. You cannot comprehend what you are not capable of, but I do not always stick to that. I think that it's a huge thing that, gosh, I say it all the time. I probably say it daily because I mean, shit, when you're driving, I'm like, God, what, this person is so stupid. Like, what were you, but you're not, you can't comprehend what you're not capable of, right? And I try to like give people grace on that too when I'm anxious in the car or like road raging, you know, maybe they're having a bad day. Like, give them grace. Like, it is what it is. Let them be them. So, I kind of just wanted to go that. Let's recap a little bit between self awareness and anxiety, with everybody, you know, doing the work and healing and growing, and that therapy language being so popular nowadays. The fine line between self awareness and self analysis. There's a difference. Self awareness is noticing the patterns, reflecting on behavior, learning from experience. Anxiety disguised as self-awareness is replaying things over and over again, assuming you did something wrong. Every reaction someone has, try to predict how they're feeling about you, right? So self-awareness is to ask questions. Anxiety interrogates you. When you're self-aware, you're going to ask questions about everything. When you're anxious, you're going to interrogate yourself, right? Signs we may be spiraling, y'all. We're playing those conversations for hours, assuming someone is upset, over explaining. I didn't get on this one very much. Over explaining is so, you will notice when someone is anxious in a conversation if you're just quiet and you let them talk, because 9 times out of 10 they're going to over explain themselves into a hole. If they're anxious, like, they are going to, it's wild because I've seen it happen, and then I've also done it myself, and I think it's crazy. I always tell people I'm very comfortable with uncomfortable, I'm very comfortable with silence, and I'm very comfortable with awkward, because I have learned to like let people talk, because they will literally talk their ways into so much. The feeling responsible for other people's emotions, y'all, we cannot control how someone feels and thinks. Like, at the end of the day, we just cannot control it. We cannot help them. We cannot change it. Gosh, and if we stress about things that we can't change, look, I'm not perfect. I'm going to preach to y'all. I'm not really preaching, but I'm going to tell y'all these things. And it's things that I should really preach to myself and like do in my everyday life, honey, because I don't. So, anyway, don't stress over things you can't control, period. I'd be saying that all the time to myself, and it doesn't happen. Overanalyzing text messages, y'all. Don't have deep conversations. Don't say things. If you are the type of person to say something deep or say something important in text message, stop now. Because you never know if the other person on the other end is like overanalyzing those things. If you are the overanalyzer, stop. Pick up the phone, call them. Like, yeah. Anyway, I'm really bad at both of those things. At some point, it stops being reflection and it starts being emotional surveillance. So instead of like reflecting on your actions, maybe how you could do better, every night I try to sit there and like think of the day and think of things that I could have done differently or would want to do differently next time, whatever the case is. But if I'm like overanalyzing things so much to the point where like I'm, spiraling into that, that's where it becomes unhealthy. Reflection is huge. Self-surveillance is bad. Why it happens, y'all. We talked about the people pleasing, but the fear of doing something wrong. We care about growth so much that we don't want to hurt others. And I respect that and I hear that. But I think that we can't always look at that negative side, right? We have to look at the side of like, okay, well, what if I do something right? Not what if I do something wrong. Past relationships, I didn't mention this either, but I think it's really important that we think about, how things have evolved over the years, and how just because we're at a point in our life where we're looking at ourselves and we're managing our own emotions, we've been in past relationships, and so probably have our partners or our friends been in past relationships where they have literally had to regulate everybody's emotion in the relationship, right? I've been in those relationships. It's exhausting, and going from that type of relationship to a healthy one is very weird. And so like I'm so used to that regulating of emotions that's my autopilot, right? And so we have to think about that when we're like dealing with others, is like, what are we bringing from our past relationship? Did we manage emotions there? Do we have to do the same thing here? Can we just regulate our own and not regulate everybody's in the room, right? And this is friends, y'all. This could be friends, family, coworkers. This is not just intimate relationships. And when I say intimate relationships, I mean like partners, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, whatever that case is, husband, wife. This plays a part in everything. Being accountable for your behavior is healthy. Feeling responsible for everybody else's emotions, that's exhausting. Caring and feeling about of course we care about people's feelings, right? We don't want to hurt them. That's why it says like being accountable for your behavior. You're not intentionally hurting others, right? That's what it is. But when we're like trying to manage others' feelings, we're shrinking ourselves for that. We have to, there's a fine line, y'all. There's a fine line everywhere. And I think that it's really hard to like cross those lines. And some people are so caught up in like, oh, I'm so self-aware, that they don't realize that they're anxious too, and that anxiety is building and growing and bleeding out on others, right? I was having a conversation not too long ago with someone who became very reflective of their life, like very short, very quick, and just realized a lot about themselves. And they literally said to me, Tiffany, my anxiety is so high that my behaviors, because of my anxiety, bleeds on other people. They were like, so when they said like, I'm bleeding on others, it was in like this kind of, I don't even know how to explain it. It was a negative thing, right? They were saying that like their reactions and their way that they like communicate with other people, or their actions, not even reactions, their anxiety was literally like bleeding on other people and hurting other people. And that realization was just like phenomenal, because it's like, once we come to the realization that like, okay, maybe we have patterns that we need to fix, we have patterns that we need to change, it's important. And I love that. So if you resonated with anything in this podcast, you guys, please, this episode, please share, please like, please comment, tell me how you feel, tell me what you think. I hope to have more of these conversations. This is kind of like a first one, a little rough draft that I've been taking notes on for a while, and just wanted to get out to you guys. So let me know what you want to hear. Let me know what you want to talk about. Maybe next week we'll give some juiciness. I kind of want to go into maybe, am I wrong fors? Like, am I wrong for saying this to my friend when they did this? That could be juicy. I have a lot of those. So let's see, guys. Check it out, share, like, hit the notifications. Talk to you guys later.